Are you pleased with yourself?
Can you explain, like, the quotations around the title?
You can only ever kind of make the movie that you sort of imagined yourself.
Just completely obliterated me.
Your interpretation of it is subjective.
Wuthering Heights, a 19th century Gothic drama written by Emily Bronte, a piece of classic literature that has withstood the test of time thanks to its haunting and complex narrative. For centuries, readers have been drawn in by the relationship between Cathy and Heathcliff, a love doomed to fail underneath the weight of classism, racism, and domestic abuse. It's a wicked analysis of how love curdles itself into a poison when the world oppresses that love. As all Gothic novels are, Wuthering Heights is like a horror disguised as a romance. Modern readers don't cling to this text centuries after its publication because it's got good smut. We cling to it because it's a reflection of a society we are still trying to fix. But the recent film adaptation asks you to just forget all that. Put on your favorite corset, grab some wine, and drink up the sweat dripping from Jacob Elordi's mutton chops. This video is not a detailed breakdown of the film, nor is it just a dog pile of criticism onto the director, Fennell. Rather, I want to ask a larger question about film adaptations. Why are they such a vital part of the Hollywood ecosystem? When does something turn from an adaptation into a bastardization? And since art is subjective, does any of this actually matter? A 2018 report from Stephen Follows showed that for almost 15 years straight, adaptations made up 50% of all the highest grossing movies in the United States. The sources may vary: books, comics, graphic novels, short stories, fan fiction, Reddit. But the takeaway is the same for producers. Adaptations make money. More importantly, they make money predictably. They have a formula. Step 1, identify your source material. Step 2, attach your A-list actors. Step 3, create buzz about what makes this adaptation different and good. Step 4, recoup your budget during the first weekend when people rush to the theaters to love and hate your film. See, it doesn't actually matter if an adaptation is good or bad, because oftentimes they still make money. And that's thanks to a producer's favorite little secret: the built-in audience. No matter how many times an original film receives resounding praise and gratitude from moviegoers, it will never change that producers like the reliability of a film that comes with a built-in audience. Adaptations, sequels, prequels based on real-life movies, biopics, you see the pattern, right? A movie with pre-existing source material comes with people who are already half convinced to see it purely because they know something about said source material. It doesn't have to be good to be profitable, because to the Hollywood machine, being profitable is being good. For artists, this is a double-edged sword of opportunity. We all want to make original work, and the hurdles you jump to get to that point make the payoff that much sweeter. I mean, look how much love and care and time was put into something like Sinners. And even if every award show snubs this masterpiece, the cultural love for it will be studied and remembered for all of cinema history. It is always worth it. But those hurdles that come with original films are not small, and who among us doesn't have a favorite book or story we've always imagined bringing to life through our eyes? And that's what I imagine Fennell felt when she decided to adapt this novel. Off the back of not one, but 2 original screenplays, maybe she thought, okay, I'd like to explore something different, something with a larger legacy, and something that I don't have to spend as much time convincing executives will work. Thus came her fantasy of adapting Wuthering Heights. And oh boy, what a fantasy this movie is. Just about everyone on the internet has broken down the drama surrounding this film, so I'm not going to spend too much time doing that, but I've noticed there are some fans of the film and some Jacob Elordi defenders who feel comfortable villainizing anyone who is upset with this adaptation. And I get it. Sometimes you want to turn your brain off and just watch a fun movie, but Wuthering Heights is not the story that we should turn our brains off for, nor is it a fun novel type beat. Running parallel to the trad wife, high-value woman content is a trend of what some are calling anti-intellectualism. Creators claiming it's okay to shut off your brain. Don't think too hard. Can we just enjoy things? It's not that deep. all fall into this category of being anti-intellectuals. They acknowledge the world is just too hard and too heavy and there's too much news, so maybe we should just turn our brains off sometimes and not think. And I get it. There is a lot happening in the world right now, and I get that desire to want to escape into something mindless. But when it comes to art, I'll probably go to my grave saying this, but folks, the purpose of art is to make you think. And that's not to say we can't have lighthearted stories with more simple plot lines, but those should still inspire deeper thoughts and feelings. Promoting this notion of just don't think when it comes to art is not quirky and fun. It's explicitly threatening the progress we're still fighting for around the world that allows people to have their own opinions and ideas and to express them safely and freely. But sure, for the sake of this argument, I'll acknowledge that it's nice to have less intense stories to watch on screen, and sometimes it's just fun to have a good movie. My point still stands. Wuthering Heights is not the story for that. Fennell has gone on record multiple times saying her script was written based on a memory of a book, a vague idea of the story, a fantasy of Wuthering Heights. Credit to her, again, fantasy is the perfect word for it, because even if I squint and turn my head 180 degrees away from the screen, it still looks nothing like the novel. In the book, Kathy dies at 18. This character is perpetually a girl forever and always. Actually, for the section of the novel that Fennell focuses on, almost all the characters are canonically 10 to 15 years younger than their actors. Not to mention the Heathcliff of it all, not to mention the way domestic violence is portrayed as kink and fetish, not to mention the removal of a character that's quite central to the plot, not to mention the removal of the entire second half of the novel, not to mention, again, the Heathcliff of it all. Hey now. I'm not a stickler for adaptations, truly. I am actually a very passionate defender that film adaptations cannot and should not feel constrained by the source material. It's not the same medium. Changes should be made and celebrated, even acknowledged as part of the process. But this film went so far with the changes that it no longer feels like these two stories are even remotely similar. It's unfair to dismiss the frustration and offense people are taking with this film, because this is not a slight difference in taste. This is a critical disagreement about what Bronte's story means and how to uphold its legacy. Taking on an adaptation is a significant responsibility. As an artist, you're reaching back in time, asking the original author to trust you. You're transforming their work into something new, something fundamentally different, and hopefully preserving some of that original magic while shedding new light on it. However, this, for many, feels like someone has taken a knife to the original text, cut out some fragments they liked, and completely warped those fragments. But is that even wrong? Well, if you plan to call it an adaptation, then yes, it is. Now, when it comes to adapting something like a novel into a film, Fennell and pretty much every other director who's done an adaptation will agree that you cannot get all of that source material into one film. So walking away from film adaptations, people who really love the novel version of said film will often feel like something was missing. And this is true. There will always be something missing, something ephemeral. Maybe you can't even put words to it because it is not the same medium. However, there are plenty of film adaptations that make changes to the source material for the purposes of creating a logical, entertaining, and thought-provoking film adaptation that people walk away from loving. And there are plenty of film adaptations that, even though you shouldn't do this, you could watch instead of reading the book and still sort of understand the plot. Even though you should always read the book to get the entire story if you want to write essays or do research or prove a point about the novel itself. Have I never written a book report based on the movie instead of the book? No, I'm an intellectual. I read the Spark Notes instead. But this is all important to acknowledge because, again, the term that we're using here, the term that Emerald Fennell has been using is adaptation. Because this is the genre Hollywood has qualified as anything you're taking from a book to a movie. But there is something specific that was done to the movie Wuthering Heights that people noticed and made them go, okay, and is currently being used as a defense for why there are so many changes in this film. When fans fans noticed the all-important quotation marks in the title, theories sparked about what the movie actually was. Maybe it's not an adaptation, maybe we're watching a woman escape from her own reality into the book, self-inserting as Kathy, losing herself in a sexual fantasy that distorts the original text. These theories sparked because people love Fennell's other work. I know I do. Her direction is impactful and stylized. She chooses interesting material, doesn't apologize for it, and allows her characters to be unlikable and gritty. So for a while, fans were trying to justify the extreme changes being made. They trusted her previous work and wanted to see this succeed. But the closer we crept towards this film's premiere, the more distrustful audiences became. No, this wouldn't be a subversion of the genre, nor would it be a faithful adaptation. This would be a feverish, sexed-up bodice ripper that completely distorts the complexity Bronte's story held. And the quotation marks were a shield, a protective barrier from critics who would judge all the departures, an acknowledgement that this is one interpretation among many possibilities. The book is riddled with nuance and narrative depth. There is so much violence and so much love in spite of the violence, and the love is toxic and harmful and childish and ignorant. It is, as Fennell agrees, a dense story. However, there was a line that was crossed for many fans of the book, an invisible line between adaptation and bastardization. Something fundamentally essential about the book was lost in production. Rightly so, some will argue it was having a white Heathcliff. Others will point to the changes made to Isabella Linton, but if we're honest, it was probably not one single choice. It was the pile of many, many choices that contort the source material into something unrecognizable, justifying those choices by putting quotation marks around the title just to say, hey, this is our interpretation, don't be upset if you don't like my changes. It feels like a half-formed apology, half-formed admission that this is a film loosely inspired by Wuthering Heights, rather than an actual representation of Wuthering Heights. So how do we fix this problem? Quite simple, actually. Change the name of the movie. If this film had been developed and released under a different title, we'd probably be looking at a slam dunk box office hit instead of a rating split. Now, yes, this movie is making good money, but again, that's because of what I mentioned previously about a built-in audience, adaptations doing well regardless of the love or hate, and the controversy surrounding the film. As someone who read the book in preparation for the movie, I knew from every trailer, interview, and teaser about the movie that it was not going to be for me. I wasn't going to like it, and I ended up not liking it. And that's because I believe the story hinges on Heathcliff being cast with a person of color, and so there was a pretty glaring issue with this interpretation of the book, and I knew that. But I also wanted to see it to prove to myself, and as the point of this video is, to talk about the limitation that this Hollywood term of adaptation carries. We've gone so far as to acknowledge this is one version of Wuthering Heights, a version based on a memory and a fantasy of the novel. We've removed a key character because he didn't fit the narrative. We've erased the racial component from the book about the harms of racism. We've embraced an aesthetic that's completely detached from reality. We've sexualized the characters beyond the novel's scope, so I am sincerely asking, why are we forcing this to be an adaptation when it's clearly just not Wuthering Heights? I mean, just look at this article from Vulture. When asked if you should read the book before seeing the movie, a number of journalists agree. Don't do that. So much of the fun of a cultural event like this is everyone freaking out together about some huge, divisive, horny, shared cinematic experience. I think retaining only a vague recollection of the book is the ideal way to go into the movie. It's fine to just go in with a vague memory of what happens in the novel, or none at all. Huh? These three go back and forth about what Emerald's version is and what it isn't. According to them, this is a movie exploring the idea of a doomed, toxic romance that uses sex and death and absurdity to paint an obsessive, flawed relationship. It is a beautiful and at times alarming aesthetic diversion from the stuffy period piece dramas we all know and love, freeing itself of rules of a certain era and embracing the playful nature of film. It is is a script written with the intention of telling the story as you remember it, not as it is on paper. But what no one is willing to say in this conversation is that this is not an adaptation of Wuthering Heights. It is an experiment in memory versus reality, as well as female fantasy and sexuality. But at best, this is a script influenced by the ghost of Wuthering Heights. Ironic, when the novel Wuthering Heights is about the ghost of Kathy haunting Wuthering Heights. But I digress. Now, the book may have been the biggest inspiration, but it was one of 14 other stories Fennell was inspired by. She released a full syllabus of other projects that she took inspiration from while developing this feature. So why not embrace that? I do genuinely believe if this film had been developed and presented as Drive Me Mad, a film inspired by Wuthering Heights, audiences would have accepted many of these changes without feeling betrayed or offended. I also feel if we had gone into developing this movie with the mindset of, I am not restricted by Wuthering Heights, I am going to lean further into this exploration of memory versus reality and the fantasy of it all, then the movie that we actually did get would have been better. The things I really liked about this movie, besides some of the performances of these side characters, were the visuals and the music and setting something so disconnected from a period piece with the Charlie XCX soundtrack to these visuals that felt very cinematic and very dramatic. You had an almost Fortress of Solitude type of structure behind the Wuthering Heights household. And how sick. That's cool. Watching the film reminded me a lot of old Hollywood movies where it felt like everything was sort of a otherworldly interpretation of what this thing would have been, what this world would have looked like. And if we hadn't been bogged down by the title or the concept of Kathy and Heathcliff and Wuthering Heights and this specific Bronte story, I think the world could have been developed further and we could have leaned even more into the kinkiness or the sexiness or the cheating scandal of it all, or something. Instead of always trying to come back and refit these characters into the source material that you're sort of kind of trying to convince everyone that this movie is. And just to be clear, I actually don't think this is one person's fault. Emerald is the creative lead behind this, yes. But what a lot of us are forgetting is that the institution of Hollywood is also a problem in this. Hollywood has to make room for artists to create work that doesn't fit into neat little boxes. Right now, there is no middle ground between adaptations and original stories, but we need one. I would have loved to see a kink-filled romance on Valentine's Day weekend, but I can't do that because, again, I've been told that the kink-filled romance is Wuthering Heights, the novel where a man digs up the grave of a woman because he is so haunted by the memory of her toxic love that he'd rather see her rotting corpse than find peace. The novel where a woman is so badly brutalized by that same man that she flees across the country to live in isolation with her son until she dies. That novel, that's the sexy movie starring Barbie and Elvis? Are we sure? How you frame a story is half the battle with convincing people it's good. Emerald Fennell is not the biggest, baddest villain of flawed adaptations. She's one of many trying to bottleneck a script into the canon of its source material. But why not embrace its differences? Why not thank Bronte for her work and show how it inspired you to make something new, something adjacent to that story? I agree with everything being said by the creative team about art being subjective, about wanting to focus on one element of a story, about wanting to explore something new through something timeless. But I also feel like we need to be able to critique and discuss the impact of adaptations that are so significantly different from the source material. Because if a 14-year-old girl fueled up by Red Bull and sleep deprivation cannot write an A+ essay about Wuthering Heights from seeing this film alone, then maybe it's not actually an adaptation. Maybe it's just a sexy movie that smoked a pack of Wuthering Heights cigarettes, so it sort of vaguely still smells like the vibe of Kathy and Heathcliff. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please be sure to subscribe and click the bell so you get notified every single time I post. This one was tricky. I am an artist myself. I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I'm a lot of things. And I want to acknowledge how difficult it is to make a movie. I do think that that is something that costs a lot of time, is a very vulnerable thing, and I really genuinely believe that every artist behind this project had good intentions. I think the internet is a very nuanceless place, and I think it's really unhelpful, and so I'm sincerely hoping and asking anyone who is still watching at this point to treat this conversation with nuance. You can be angry about White Heathcliff, like, I think that should go without saying. But I think finding a way to critically talk about that anger instead of just dogpiling onto I hate X, Y, and Z person, or this person shouldn't be an artist, whatever, that's not helpful. I do really value when people I trust and love, and people that I don't even know, give me feedback that says, hey, these pieces are good, but these pieces you need to improve. That is part of my artistic process, and I think it's valuable for every artist to have a little bit of that. So all that to say, I'm really not trying to dogpile. I just love talking about movies, and I don't want to just ever be doing anything negative. I just think that we should be able to have a critical conversation. Isn't that crazy? Nuance is dead. But I'm not. I'm on social media everywhere. Instagram, TikTok, Letterboxd. You can come find me and follow me. All of those links are down below. If you're in London and you want to see me perform live, you can come see my comedy show, Bitter Hearts, on March 13th. We are at Union Theatre. I need to go. Leave a comment down below what your thoughts are because I clearly have been saying mine for too long. Okay. Love you. Bye.